Okay, hear me out. I know that the Barbie movie and Evangelion Thrice Upon a Time, I'm specifically talking about that one film and not Eva as a whole, are drastically different visually, tonally, and in how seriously they take their characters and stories. Evangelion is a self-serious sci-fi series that knows it's been around for way too long, and Barbie is a self-aware comedy about toys. Both movies aim to be different things for different audiences, and I'm not saying Eva is better art because it's more serious than the playful Barbie movie. I did like Barbie way more than Oppenheimer. Spoilers for the Barbie movie and Evangelion Thrice Upon a Time. But in terms of plot beats, Barbie and Thrice Upon a Time are very similar. The main character falls into depression when they find out that what they thought they did for the greater good turned out not to have the positive impact they expected. They are pulled out of depression through compassion from their friends and community. They confront the patriarchy by just talking to the guy, conclude that they must move on from their past life and relationships, and transition into the real world both physically and metaphorically. And moreover, I believe these films try to do the same things. Both of these films want to 1. Sell us on the beauty of the human experience, and 2. Hold a compelling conversation between the audience and their respective franchises. And from this perspective, I think Evangelion Thrice Upon a Time succeeds because it takes a lot of care to make its points emotionally appealing while understanding its medium's reach, whereas Barbie failed to appeal to me because it bit off way more than it can chew. Okay, we're not wasting any time here. Argument 1. Evangelion Thrice Upon a Time's first half is spent following Shinji, a boy who unknowingly fucked up the world, depressed and shunning everyone around him out of shame and self-loathing, while Rei, a clone of a clone who knows very little about the world, adapts to living in Village 3. Village 3 is a town populated by the survivors of the catastrophic near-third impact that made most of Earth uninhabitable for humans, and everyone is trying their hardest to make the best of their lives. These scenes romanticize the hell out of post-apocalyptic real life, almost to the point where it's so inspiring, it loops back around to being a little depressing. Like, when we reach that point of no return in this climate crisis, the image of this strong, supportive community is like our best case scenario. Anyway, because this village life is so beautiful, when I first watched this film, I was viewing these Rei scenes with a slight sense of skepticism. You can see from a mile away what her tragic end is. She's going to learn all these things about human life, only for her life to end very quickly. Yet her last scene really touched me, and when I watched the film for the second time, I was crying at almost every Rei scene leading up to it. There is so much love and compassion and forgiveness and tenderness in these scenes. Then Rei takes this love that she learned from her community and gives it to Shinji, who initially pushes her away, but even his depression is crushed under the weight of her love. It is genuinely one of the most moving sequences I've ever seen. This film depicts a chain reaction of someone learning to love by receiving love, changing another person by giving them love, and then that person going out into the world to share their love and kindness. It plays out the message very well, and so it succeeds at giving me hope for humanity. The ending where Shinji reaches emotional maturity and is finally allowed to physically mature and enter the real world feels sincere. And Barbie came nowhere close to having that same effect on me. When the final scene of her choosing to become human came up, I rolled my eyes because why? I get that this Barbie has seen too much to stay a Barbie anymore, but what convinced her to want to become human? Because first of all, the real world is clearly worse off. California looks like ass, and it's not just because it's in contrast to the vibrant, bubblegum-colored Barbie land. We see concrete, we see gray buildings, we see one park with really awkward shots of nature surrounding it, and then there's that middle school lunch table area where I can feel the hot, oddly sticky plastic-covered metal seats. Damn it, couldn't they have romanticized the park scenes just a little bit more? It doesn't help that Barbie is far too passive in her interactions with the real world. I am not convinced that she was actually inspired by humanity to the point of wanting to become human. Most of the beauty she takes in is through observation, and the clear highlight of her experience in the real world is staring at people in the park and talking to an old lady for 30 seconds. Are these scraps enough for Barbie and the audience vicariously to feel the wonder that is the human experience? It certainly wasn't for me, so it made perfect sense why Barbie stays depressed and wants to maintain the status quo up until the last 20 minutes of the movie. And when we do get to the end, I was confused as to why Barbie decides to change her life completely. Like, on paper, it makes sense. Her life starts going wrong, so she has to explore the unknown. The adventure leads to a moment of crisis. She overcomes that crisis, is changed, and takes on a new life. Her arc fits the hero's journey perfectly, but based on what the movie actually showed me, I'm not emotionally satisfied by her final choice. The more I think about it, stereotypical Barbie's passivity is the most damaging thing about this story. She already has a picture-perfect life, so she sees no reason to change. She reluctantly responds to her call to adventure in order to regain that previous life, has her real-world friends do all the heavy lifting, and finally chooses to become human only because life as a Barbie doesn't sit right with her anymore. She's not a very compelling protagonist. On the other hand, Ken's out there trying to change his life from the start, explores and learns from the real world, and although he makes things worse in Barbie Land, proactively works towards what he sees as bettering his life and peers. And at least in Evangelion, the meek and whiny Shinji is frequently punished for his passivity. That being said, I don't think Barbie is the worst protagonist ever or anything that extreme. Admittedly, her depression makes her relatable, and while the script is heavy-handed, the women around her do inspire her to take some action. Yet ultimately, when I'm presented with a woman who is extremely passive, paired with an extremely proactive man, it makes it harder to accept the intended feminist messages of the movie. Which leads me to my next point. Argument 2. My second criticism about how Barbie invites the audience to have a conversation with its franchise is more subjective. Let me be clear. I thought the Barbie movie was funny, the acting was great, Ryan Gosling stole the show, and most of all, I think it looked amazing. I loved the fashion and set design, and I know I just said California looks like ass, but I think the Mattel office scenes were also fun and did a great job exaggerating the drab, rigid corporate setting. I thought it was a good film and I would recommend it to people. I don't even have issues with its core messages. I'm nitpicky about its delivery, but I generally like the messages, and I'm happy that it speaks to so many women. But when it comes down to it, the Barbie movie does not appeal to me. My relationship with Barbie is that I used to chew on her feet, and one of those eerie collector edition Barbies that come out around Christmas time taunted me from on top of my bedroom drawer because my parents wouldn't let me open her box. I did have a Dika-chan doll that had heat-sensitive colored hair, and I thought that was very cool. As you can tell, my attachment to Barbie is shallow. Moreover, I did not go into this film to watch Barbie, the Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach film, but to see how the Mattel cinematic universe was going to start. I sat there in the theater with my arms crossed thinking, show me what I'm going to put up with for the next 10 years. Show me what's going to be shoved down my throat, Mattel. I approach this as a product of a corporation first, and as a piece of art second. And I do feel bad about this because I do have praise for this film as art, and I could feel this film trying its hardest to do whatever it can within its power to reach out to people like me. The film says very loudly that it recognizes that a lot of girls find Barbie childish and cringe, realizes the hypocrisy of a group of corporate men selling a toy for young girls, and that no matter how diverse Barbie becomes, it can't win against the standards real-life women are subjected to. This movie knows it and addresses it, but for me, it's still not enough. Making transparent the fact that Mattel is a capitalistic toy company run by men seeking profits rather than women trying to inspire girls does not change that same reality. And so when I'm not invested in Barbie personally, and I can't ignore that Mattel is ultimately using feminist messages for financial profit, this film's sincere comments about patriarchy and feminism don't speak to my heart. For example, and I know how unfair I'm going to sound, but how the Barbies regain power back from the Kens by taking advantage of their tendency to talk endlessly about movies or sports, or passionately sing songs to them, doesn't make me feel empowered. Men being overconfident is the least of my concerns about patriarchy when I live in a world where not only do women get grapes, lots of women don't feel safe enough to report their grapes, and even if they do, the chances of reparations in any form are slim because there's a backlog of grape kits. The Barbies voting really hard to get Barbie Land back does not make me feel empowered when in the real world, Roe v. Wade was overturned. I know the last thing happened while the movie was in production, but the point still stands, and I would go as far as to say that that scene was in poor taste. Even while acknowledging the movie's limits, knowing that Barbie should not be tasked with destroying patriarchy, nor should anyone have that expectation, the injustices of the real world are far too prevalent to ignore, and so the preachiness of the major scenes falls flat. It's not the bluntness of the feminist messages itself that turns me off. I think films should be allowed to be pretty loud about this kind of message in these dark times. But I feel like this film expects me to forgive the fact that it's a toy movie when I simply can't. I'm frustrated that this supposedly self-aware film wasn't self-aware of the fundamental limits of its messaging. If I can summarize my feelings with a very convoluted metaphor, it's like I'm thinking of Barbie as a kid who's very excited to eat lots of cake, and she takes a giant slice of cake that I know she's not going to finish, but I let her take it anyway. She eats more than half of her slice, more than I expected, but she still leaves a lot of it unfinished. She's very proud of herself for eating what she did, and I guess I am too, but I'm also disappointed that she didn't take a more reasonable portion in the first place, and now we're left with a chunk of uneaten cake that we gotta throw away. It's that kind of frustration, you know? To circle back around, the reason I compare Barbie to Eva Thrice Upon a Time is that Eva is also a film largely built on meta commentary, but I feel like it knew the extent of its reach and worked very well within the limits it set for itself. The themes it tackles are much more self-contained, and it helps that the series' metatextuality has been recognized by its fandom for years. What Thrice Upon a Time was tasked with was concluding Evangelion, a series infamous for unsatisfying endings. A lot of people hated the original TV ending for its abstractness, and then End of Eva gave us fans a more tangible ending in exchange for leaving a gaping hole in our hearts. A decade later, fans thought the Rebuild series was going to wrap things up in a tidy fashion, but once again, we had to wait almost 9 years between the third and fourth film. There were high expectations for how this series was going to end, and if you ask me, I think Thrice Upon a Time did a good job. It gave all the major characters a satisfying end to their arcs, literally one by one, and allowed them to lead the story they were trapped in. It told the audience, the fans that have been stuck following the story for 20 years, that Eva has come to an end and it's time for everyone to move on to something new. Now, it would be silly of me to ignore the merchandising empire of Evangelion when I'm comparing it to a literal toy movie. With its countless figurines, stationary pachinko machines, toolkits, clothing, accessories, and engagement rings, Studio Power tries to squeeze as much money out of its IP as Mattel does. There is undoubtedly a heavily commercial aspect to Evangelion, but at least it looks cool, it's aimed towards Evangelion fans, and the company isn't trying to be a cultural influence through its merchandise. I also trust that the money from the Eva films and other products went into supporting the animation industry. It's been about a decade since it was established, but Studio Car helped run the Japan Animator Expo back in 2014, a project that allowed new animators an opportunity for exposure. It's stuff like this that lets me separate Evangelion, the multimedia franchise, and Anno Hideaki's artistic vision of Evangelion. And that brings me back to my major point of comparison. I can't do the same separation between Mattel, the toy company, and the art, Barbie, the film. And that's the main reason I'm making this video. Well, I get an excuse to make an End of Eva thumbnail too, but I have to grapple with how I approach these franchise films moving forward and accept that Eva has put my standards up pretty darn high. Barbie is a good standalone film, but Mattel Films wants it to be their Iron Man. This is supposed to be the beginning of a new MCU. Quoting Alex Brack's excellent New Yorker article on the future of Mattel films, Mattel has amassed a long slate of other projects. Daniel Kaluuya, for example, has agreed to produce a feature about Barney, the purple dinosaur. 13 more films have been publicly announced, including movies about He-Man and Polly Pocket. 45 are in development. Unless you are literally James Cameron, it's really hard to see the art in a project this big and costly. Furthermore, I go to movies mainly looking for a complete, concise, self-contained experience. And I hate that movies are getting more expensive to make, and studios are putting more of their budget into multi-part films or crossover series. People have superhero fatigue not just because we're tired of superheroes, but because every film, even the ones that introduce a new hero, feels like they're forcing us to sign up for something bigger and more exhausting. Relaunches of older IP also feel tiresome because not only do they often feel repetitive and shallow, but they also carry cultural baggage from their previous incarnations. Every time I saw that new Indiana Jones trailer, I was internally screaming, "Let Harrison Ford rest." And I'll be honest, Evangelion is exhausting too. I have to take a deep, long sigh every time I have to explain the watch order to someone. But at least I know it's done now. I wish I could say the same about Barbie.